This is a Media Lab podcast. Welcome to Putting It Together, the podcast that goes through the entire body of work of Stephen Sondheim, show by show and song by song. My name is Kyle Marshall, your self-described Sondheim expert. Well, it feels like we've lived a year of perpetual anticipation, or maybe it's just been waiting for Matthew Richardson to return. His last appearance was way back in the Being Alive episode during the company season. It's been a while. But luckily, he was game to come on and discuss these two songs with me today. It Would Have Been Wonderful is like two supposed alpha males striding around. And then there's Perpetual Anticipation, which is a song that appears in Act 2 of A Little Night Music. But before we get to my conversation with Eric, if you'd like to help support the show for absolutely free, you can give a rating and review on whatever app you listen to podcasts in. That's greatly appreciated. And if you'd like to help monetarily, which will only help grow and make this show better, you can also do so over at our Patreon page. Please do not donate if it impacts you negatively financially. I do want to call out that there is a new patron that we got this week, so thank you so much, Robert, for joining the Patreon page. But I do need to give a huge thank you to the God That's Good tier, the triumphant quartet of Jack, Todd, Barry, and Carrie. And now it's time for Plodding Along. This is the part of the show where I bring you up to date on what is going on in the plot. So the guests are waiting for dinner to be served, and Frederick finds himself out on a balcony with Carl Magnus. They both reflect on what Desiree could have done so that they didn't both end up here. And then when dinner is served, Perpetual Anticipation is a song that is used to foreshadow the explosive desires that will be unleashed momentarily. Let me go thank some sponsors, and then when we return, it'll be me talking with Matthew Richardson about It Would Have Been Wonderful and Perpetual Anticipation. Putting It Together is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, locally grown, community supported. The Alberta Podcast Network promotes and supports Alberta-made podcasts and connects their audiences with Alberta-based businesses and organizations. This episode of Putting It Together is brought to you by the Calgary Foundation, proudly supporting community needs for 65 years. Everyone wants to feel a sense of belonging. Now, more than ever, we are united by a desire to take action and help others by creating community built on kindness and compassion. From small creative projects to larger citizen-led initiatives, the Calgary Foundation provides grassroots grants to encourage and support people who want to create and strengthen bonds between neighbors and communities. If you've got an idea to improve, enhance, or revitalize your community or neighborhood, visit calgaryfoundation.org to find out more about the Foundation's grant opportunities, and visit the Calgary Foundation's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube channel. This week we're also brought to you by the Alberta Podcast Network, so let's go and listen to one of the other great shows.
The show you're listening to is part of the Alberta Podcast Network. Locally grown, community supported. Another show from the network that you should check out is Repodcasting. Have you ever watched a movie and there was an actor in it that was all wrong for the part they were playing? Have you ever wanted to imagine someone else in the role? Never fear, that's precisely why Repodcasting exists. Listen as co-hosts and cousins Janet and Lucia recast their favorite and not so favorite movies with their dream cast. They also take a moment each episode to imagine which role in the film should have been given to Tony Danza, because let's face it, Tony Danza would make every movie better. You can find Repodcasting wherever you listen to podcasts or at albertapodcastnetwork.com. Happy listening.
I should never have gone to the theater. Then I'd never have come to the country. If I never had come to the country, matters might have stayed as they were.
Eric, thank you so much for coming back.
Thank you for having me back, Kyle. It's been a year.
No, it's been a while. It has been a time that has elapsed.
It has been a time.
I mean, you have been here before, of course.
Correct.
I wanted somewhat jump right into it But just talking about A Little Night Music broadly, when was the first time that you encountered A Little Night Music?
Oh man, I was trying to remember this. I had seen the movie at some point in my life.
The movie based on the musical, correct?
Correct.
Yeah,
correct.
Okay.
The movie based on the Hal Prince one.
Yeah.
I had seen that movie at some point in my life. I think vaguely it was like in school. I don't know why. Like it must have been like a choir class or something related to music.
A teacher had given up trying to teach you kids.
Right. It must have been like the end of the year, and it's like, well, I don't know. I don't know why they chose that one.
Yeah.
It's not really appropriate for school, but
like not at all. Yeah.
So I don't know. That's why I'm thinking like, and I can't remember what grade I was in. I can't remember how old I was, but I had seen it and then completely forgotten about it. And so I don't think I visited it again until maybe in college when I was just going through, the Sondheim list,
right,
and like checking out each one. It's an interesting one because it's not. I don't think listening to it, and maybe some other listeners would disagree, but I don't think listening to it is enjoyable. And I don't mean that in that it's bad. I mean that in that it is not very exciting to listen to from tip to tail, and you don't get much of what's going on. I think it's something that you do have to be watching or in a theater to really glean, especially like the humor doesn't really come out until you see it.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest one for me.
Yeah.
I keep saying kind of this similar story, but because I first listened to this score as a teenager, like 15 or 16 years old, really didn't understand at all what was going on in the plot because, again, slow internet, couldn't look it up. But also, like, yeah, you don't really lock in that this is a very funny show.
Right.
But I don't know if you notice that if you're just listening to the music.
Especially even if you're like just reading the plot or something just to like get, like, you're still not getting the humor. You're not getting the funnier parts about it. Especially with the whole, spoiler alert, but the ending of it's kind of leading towards this like grand death of many people. Right. And all of that is subverted. But yeah, I don't know. It's one of those shows that is very well done on an artistic level, right? But it's not necessarily like exciting. Like you're not like, I'm going to throw on Little Night Music and jam out with my friends.
Right, I see what you're saying. Yeah. I keep saying that A Little Night Music is the one score of Sondheim's that I can actually throw on in the background while I'm doing other things.
Yeah.
Because I just like the actual music itself. But yeah, you're right. It's not like, it's like, oh man, guess what I got? Fresh copy, Little Night Music.
Right. And it's weird. It's like, it is an artistic achievement. Like it seems like the most, at least up to this point in his career, maybe the most like cohesive product that he put out. And I think he's talked about that too, where, a lot of musicals are joined together by the fact that they are through the lens of the same composer. Where like, it's not necessarily like each individual song fits together perfectly. It's just that it's coming out of the same person. And that's sort of the glue that ties it together. Whereas this show does very much feel like it was structured to blend with itself. And I don't know if that comes from his whole thing with the threes or if it just comes from the initial concept or what, but it does feel like a show that is truly one cohesive thing.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing to point out, because even like if we just work backwards from his two other like major works that he was composer for, both lyrics and music. Like right before this, we have Follies, but Follies is just filled with music that is like pastiches of other things.
Right.
And then even in Company, he's trying out like different feelings to those songs, whereas Little Night Music is like, yeah, this all leads with one another. If you listen through the entire thing, it's like nothing really feels like super out of place.
Right.
If you're as a collection of songs. I also find, I'll just speak for myself, that Little Night Music is also, going through this season and doing deep dives into each one of the songs. there's been a couple that have really snuck up on me. I'm like, oh man, this is actually a lot even more intricate than what I was thinking when I first listened to this.
Yeah, it's one that
like Every Day a Little Death is the one I keep going back to, which is like, it's a pretty song when I first listened to it, but man, like really getting into there and lyric choice and music choice behind it, like there's actually a lot more to it.
Yeah, you can tell it's the first time that he got to be as clever as he wanted to be. And maybe that's for better or worse. Sometimes, it's okay to pull the reins in a bit, but he does lyrically really stretch himself a lot in this show. And I think he gets away with it because, it's like an upper class group of people who are all think themselves quite witty or quite intelligent. Mm-hmm. So I think that's sort of like the conceit you can use to get away with the more intricate lyrics that would feel wrong coming out of some like Bobby's mouth from Company or something, right? Right. So yeah, I think that's the sort of thing that attracts me to it now, is where it's not a particularly flashy on the front facing side show, but upon like closer inspection does become more interesting, does reveal new layers that is not there when you are just passively watching it.
Now, having said that, of course, you have seen the movie in the past. Have you ever seen another production of A Little Night Music at all?
This is another thing. I don't know why I have like these memories of this show that I must have just blocked out. I feel like I had seen some amateur production of this, like not a like a community theater production, but I don't know where. I don't think it was my hometown. But this is not a show that is great for community theater. I think there's a lot of especially with the Greek chorus-esque people that it's difficult. Now I have seen the filmed professional productions. I've seen the Lincoln Center one, and I feel like I've seen the one with like Kristen Bell is in it. I can't remember where that was. She's Frederica.
Did she play? Oh,
yeah.
Okay,
so it's like it's a while ago. I want to say it's like L.A. opera or something. Yeah, I mean I've seen a few productions. It's a show that does, in regards to like staging and stuff, I feel like does look pretty similar across the board. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen any production do anything particularly different from another that stood out. Apart from the actual film, which is maybe to its detriment. But
yes, yeah. Well, I guess at that point, like we are going to be talking about two songs here today. Mm-hmm. The Easy Breezy, It Would Have Been Wonderful, or Could Have Been Wonderful. And then, of course, Perpetual Anticipation, where I'm assuming the meat of our conversation is going to be, is talking about Perpetual Anticipation.
We're gonna just zip through It Would Have Been Wonderful real quick, and then I think the majority of our time will be Perpetual Anticipation.
So to give credit to where credit is due, the first song, It Would Have Been Wonderful, is going to, of course, feature Frederick and Carl Magnus. So the three versions that we're looking at here this season, Frederick is portrayed by Len Cariou, Laurence Guittard, and Alexander Hanson. And then Carl Magnus is portrayed by Laurence Guittard, Lambert Wilson, and Aaron Lazar. I've mentioned this before, but yes, the original Carl Magnus went on to be Frederick in a later production.
He graduated.
That's why we hear his name twice. Yes, that's right. Talking about staging, I just wanted to spend a moment on this because in the text here of Finishing the Hat, it mentions that this is supposed to be happening. It says, while waiting for dinner to be announced, Frederick and Carl Magnus find themselves alone with each other on the terrace outside the house. So they're basically just standing outside, kind of thinking to themselves and then crossing each other's paths, which when you hear them say, sir, that's them basically crossing over. And then they sing their own things. This is the one and only time that I'm going to give credit to Hal Prince's decisions in the movie version of A Little Night Music. Because I think this is actually the one place where he allowed himself to think of this as a cinematic endeavor. Because they're playing billiards in the film version. And I just think it's an interesting way to do this. They can still do their little soliloquies in their heads, but they're kind of, I don't know, dueling without them actually drawing.
It's I like billiards better than the more cliche version of like them sitting down to play chess.
Right. Yeah.
And you know, I do enjoy stuff like that. I think Sondheim said this before, where like when you make a film of a musical, there has to be changes. Like you're not going to just put, and I know that's a lot of people, a lot of fans dislike that. But I just recently I was watching the Into the Woods adaptation that I think fails in that regard, because it is just a lot of people standing and singing at each other. Right. So when you do a film, you can't just have two guys out on a terrace singing to nothing. That would be boring. So, you know, giving them something to do that is still related to the song, as far as like this casual battle going on between them. I think it's smart.
I have an example of something that I think actually works really well. And I don't know, maybe I'm alone and like loving this movie as much as I ended up doing. I tracked down a copy of the film version of Sweet Charity the other day. So Bob Fosse, that was his first film that he was a movie director for. There's some things that don't work, but for by and large, I find that the musical numbers really work, because he's like, no, I'm going to cross-cut. Like, we can change locations if we need to. We can do the close-ups, pullbacks. And in particular, there's this scene, when they go into like the little cult area with Big Daddy, and it's Sammy Davis Jr. who is cast in that role, and just nails that part. And they're like, there's this dancing and cross-cutting and like they're belting out and everything. And it's like, yeah, like this is a way to cinematically show what's going on and visually show, because we are our kind of two main characters enter in like halfway through that song, and we get, okay, they feel out of place and they're put over here. And so everything makes sense. Visually, we know what's going on. And it's working as a theater piece at the same time. So I think you just need those people to understand, like there's not the two options of either like just pointing a camera at people singing or you have to be like a music video. You can actually have this intermediary period of like things can be happening.
Exactly.
At the same time.
You still want to lend, the song is still the most important thing at the moment. You want to lend the visuals to the words as much as you can. You don't want to detract from them. Still, you want it to be visually interesting and not, for example, perhaps a baker and a little girl standing in the woods singing at each other.
I have no idea what you're talking about. So yeah, it would have been wonderful is what we're going to jump into now. I've broken this up. I will just preface this. I've broken this up into probably even more sections than I need to, but because this song like both speeds up and slows down, it was either do that or basically have like a minute and 45 long stretch of listening to music when I put the inserts in. So this is how we start. So Frederick is the first one to speak, and he says, I should never have gone to the theater, then I never have come to the country. If I never had come to the country, matters might have stayed as they were. And then him and Carl Magnus cross paths, and they say, Sir, sir.
I should never have gone to the theater, then I'd never have come to the country. If I never had come to the country, matters might have stayed as they were. Sir? Sir?
So this is just like the opening bit here, of course, and it even notates like that this is Frederick thinking to himself as he's singing these lines. But anything you want to call out here just at the very beginning of the piece?
Nothing in particular. However, there was something I came across in Sondheim on Music, another book, where Sondheim really digs into the more musical side of things as opposed to Finishing the Hat, which is more lyrical. Yeah. Is that this whole song, as well as The Miller's Son, were the only two songs in the show that started with the vamp first, as opposed to perhaps writing the lyrics first or something. It kind of burst forth from this that bum ba ba bum bum ba 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 bum bum, and I guess he came up with that in a Boston hotel room, which I guess is where all of his great ideas come from.
It's probably the only good things that have come out of a Boston hotel room.
yeah. But the thing that stuck out to me is that he he thought of it as two peacocks strutting.
Right.
So two peacocks strutting, and then two guys passing each other saying "Sir, sir," were the first things that came to his mind when. So it's funny that "Sir, sir" is the impetus of this song, right? It's like the beginning. It is the launching point, rather than something that was added in later after he, wrote the rest of the lyrics. So it's that "Sir, sir" really is the not just the beginning of this song, but the like progenitor of this song.
That's interesting. I like that. What a great descriptor too of like two peacocks preening and like getting mad at each other as they cross paths. The other thing I'll say, like, before we get into the kind of the meat of this song, is this is something I don't know why, but I always become so fascinated by. And maybe this is why I also like time travel movies and stuff like that. But it's this idea of like, well, if I'd only done this thing, then everything would have been different. And of course, it's impossible to prove a negative. Right. But it is interesting that he points out the fact that he was the inciting action. He kind of intuitively knows that, yeah, like if I hadn't actually physically gone and seen her after the show, if I hadn't seen Desiree, most likely this wouldn't have all happened, although he still would have had to have contend with a wife who kind of knew what was going on. And it's also like
he wasn't in a particularly like good position before this all happened to begin with. He wasn't happy, right. I would say. He wasn't living a fun life for him. So I don't know. It's that's also part of the layer of this too, that as we'll get into.
Yeah, I think so. It's like, would it have been wonderful? Like, I think it would have been different for sure, but wonderful is a pretty strong word inside that sentence. To that point, he continues on saying, if she'd only been faded, if she'd only been fat, if she'd only been jaded and bursting with chat, if she'd only been perfectly awful, it would have been wonderful. If.
If she'd only been faded, if she'd only been fat, if she'd only been jaded and bursting with chat, if she'd only been perfectly awful, it would have been wonderful. If she'd been.
So, I mean, there's some little fun wordplay there, of course, right? Faded, writing with jaded, fat, chat. Even awful and wonderful are trying to do a little bit of a rhyme scheme there. But this is kind of getting into more like the melody of the song here now.
Yeah,
too.
And it's a little more simple than the rest of what we'll see. I think it gets a little more complex as it goes on, that melody line. But it's also, that is a moment that does get a laugh when you do see it, because it would have been wonderful if this woman I'm in love with was awful,
Yeah. If she'd been awful, that would have been wonderful, because then I wouldn't have had to.
Then I wouldn't have been in love with
the
her.
Mental capacity. Yeah. Actually, what always, I don't know, stands out to me is the very first thing he says: "If she'd only been faded," because the interesting part about that is that Desiree thinks she is,
and I think she is too.
That she's this faded actress.
I think that is something that comes up a lot in this song, is that the descriptors that both men use for Desiree as being, if she'd only been this, she actually is. And they are being like, they're like convincing themselves, or like maybe they're not convincing themselves. Maybe they are just blind to the fact that she is a lot of these things, and they are pretending or just so enamored that they're not seeing that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of the magic trick of attraction, I guess, in some cases, that people will try and point out like certain flaws and stuff, and it's like, literally, I just don't see it. Like, I just don't see what people are pointing out. And even if we take it like relationships out of the thing, I mean, this is true for, I think, art in and of itself, right? There's like favorite films or plays or whatever it happens to be. People can sometimes nitpick and be like, oh, like, but how about this part that's bad? I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't bother me. Like this isn't something that I focus on.
Yeah, I don't know. It's as we get more on in the song, I think it shows both of their hands as being, I don't know, willfully ignorant people, and to their own detriment, I guess. But which is, I think it's true of a lot of people in this show. Sure. I don't think there's not really any one particular character that I find especially redeeming. Maybe Frederica, because she's doesn't really do much, but like everyone sort of has this fatal fault that they are pretending doesn't exist, and kind of gets them all into increasing amounts of trouble with each other. Yeah, I
think that for me, Frederick and Carl Magnus are both doofuses for different reasons. Like, Frederick is just like imperceptive, and I just don't think he's just not aware enough. Whereas like Carl Magnus himself is just so narcissistic that he just thinks everyone would, of course, fall at their knees for him, sort of thing. So they're kind of like the two extremes. Frederick continues on, though, by saying, if she'd been all a Twitter or elusively cold, if she'd only been bitter or better, looked passively old, if she'd been covered with glitter or even been covered with mold, it would have been wonderful. But the woman was perfection to my deepest dismay. Well, not quite perfection, I'm sorry to say. If the woman were perfection, she would go away, and that would be wonderful. Sir, and then Carl Magnus picks his up, sir.
If she'd been all a Twitter or elusively cold, if she'd only been bitter or better, looked passively old, if she'd been covered with glitter or even been covered with mold, it would have been wonderful. But the woman was perfection to my deepest dismay. Well, not quite perfection, I'm sorry to say. If the woman were perfection, she would go away, and that would be wonderful. Sir.
Anything you want to mention about this section?
It does kind of play with the patter aspect. I wouldn't call this whole song a patter song, but he dips into it in and out. It also starts playing with the rhythm a bit. It gets a little off kilter as they continue down this convincing themselves spiral. Yeah, it's one of those lyrics that I think is it's like a little puzzle that he makes, right? Where it's not, when you read it, it's not particularly significant or it doesn't look difficult, right? But the way that he sets it, the way that they sing, it becomes a tongue twister in its own little world there. And I don't know, I just love the way it flows from beginning to end. It's like it just keeps moving forward. It's a really elegant line that could have been easily inelegant.
Well, yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that you're pointing out here is that this is one of those deceptively simple lyric writings where it probably took him a while to get them like exactly fitting right the way that he wanted to make it seem so effortless. And that is hard to pull off sometimes, so it doesn't sound like overwritten or weirdly spoken or anything like that. So yeah, I mean, there's nothing flashy about it, but I think in and of itself, I think that's pretty remarkable that he's able to pull that off.
I also digging into the actual content of the lyrics too. He starts playing his hand a little more about this sort of ideal woman that he's imagined.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's parts of Frederick that I think you're supposed to sympathize with. That it's like, oh, you could imagine, and maybe not a lot of him, but it's like you're supposed to. I'd call him the main character for much of this show, but he is so blind to his own, he's not as narcissistic as Carl Magnus, but he still expects, this very outward beauty out of his lovers, right? I mean, he has this, he has this trophy wife, 18-year-old currently, who he cannot consummate with. And the things that he's focusing on in these first two verses, I mean, he does have the things about, bursting with chat or something, like being overly outspoken or being all a Twitter or elusively cold. But when he says or better, looked passably old, even barring her personality traits, if she was old looking, that would have been the best, because then I could easily
push her away. Yeah, that is the worst thing that could actually be attributed to a woman is, looking old. Well, speaking about Carl Magnus, that's when he picks it up and says, if she'd only looked flustered or admitted the worst, if she only had blustered or simpered or cursed, if she weren't so awfully perfect, it would have been wonderful. If
she'd only looked flustered or admitted the worst, if she only had blustered flustered or simpered or cursed. If she weren't so awfully perfect, it would have been wonderful. If she tried...
I'm going to point out the thing, I mentioned this before we started recording. This works because they are upper class, but because I am such a low class person, it always throws me off a little bit that they say weren't, like they make that word a 2-syllable word, when me and everyone I know, it's weren't, and it would be a 1-syllable word.
Especially me, a nice Midwestern boy who really leans into his R's. I don't think I could do a weren't if I tried, even though I just did, but it sounded inelegant.
It sounds weird for me to say it that way. It's like, it's like the old Family Guy sketch is like, what are you doing, right? Like they really accentuate the H in the words.
One other thing that stood out to me in this is the line, if she only had blustered or simpered or cursed. Just thinking about being someone who's blustering, I think of someone who's very loud or outspoken or causing a scene. Whereas simpered, I think of the opposite. I think of someone shying away and like receding in themselves. So it's funny that this ideal woman cannot be either or. She has to be somewhere, this perfection in between.
Like very specific.
Adding on to this is another thing where I think Desiree is some of these things. Like she is, going back to what Frederick said, where saying if she had been covered with glitter, I'm thinking, a showgirl sort of thing. And, she's a person of the stage. Yeah. She loves the stage, especially the faded line. And now if she only had blustered, she's pretty outgoing. It's funny that they are convincing themselves that Desiree is something that she's not, almost.
Yeah, that's the thing I keep returning back to, is that they keep using these descriptors of what we've already seen in this show that she actually is. And then, so they've convinced themselves that she's in this like other galaxy type of thing. So this is where it gets to be really interesting lyric writing for me, because we have to convincingly think that this is what they think, even though we know this isn't what she is.
It's also interesting to see Frederick kind of focusing on the outward beauty aspects or status stuff, whereas Carl Magnus, I think, focuses more on this like control. Like he wants this perfectly molded woman that is up to his standards, like he wants her to be in her place, sort of thing.
Yeah, she needs to act a certain way, is like really what he's focusing on. Yeah. This is how he continues. So he says, if she tried to be clever, if she'd started to flinch, if she'd cried or whatever a woman would do in a pinch, if I'd been certain she never again could be trusted an inch, it would have been wonderful. But the woman was perfection, not an action denied, the kind of perfection I cannot abide. If the woman were perfection, she'd have simply lied, which would have been wonderful.
If she'd tried to be clever, if she'd started to flinch, if she'd cried or whatever a woman would do in a pinch, if I'd been certain she never again could be trusted an inch, it would have been wonderful. But the woman was perfection, not an action denied, the kind of perfection I cannot abide. If the woman were perfection, she'd have simply lied, which would have been wonderful.
Again, a little ironic, because she cannot be trusted. She is lying to him. The two things he does not want her to do, and that is the entirety of the show, is surrounding the fact that she is lying to him about,
lying. 100%.
So it's. I do like that. I think it's hard to do this sort of battle of wits over the woman if they both are coming at her from the same perspective. So to really harp on having them, it's not so different a perspective, but it is, a little different. They both see Desiree as two different women. They both have made Desiree to be a person that she is not, that only exists in their minds and their reflections of her. And honestly, that might be what Desiree has been portraying herself to be to both of these men, right?
And actually something that this leapt to mind here for me. I don't know why I hadn't thought about this before. What I actually find the most interesting about this song is so Frederick is mentioning like all these like physical attributes and stuff in his lyrics, but that's really at the end of the day what Carl Magnus in the rest of the show is focused on is beauty. And the reverse is true. Like Frederick is attracted to Desiree's intellect, and Carl Magnus doesn't care, and yet that is what Carl Magnus is singing about.
Another layer.
So it's like it's like reversed the things that they actually find attractive, but that's what the opposite person is actually singing about. So yeah, another little interesting thing that they're bringing up here. Here's how the song ends. So they're going to be singing like back and forth to one another. So instead of me saying each person's name constantly, Frederick starts, if she'd only been vicious, if she'd acted abused, or a bit too delicious, or been even slightly confused, if she had only been sulky, or bristling, or bulky, or bruised, it would have been wonderful. If she'd only been willful, if she only had fled, or a little less skillful, insulted, insisting, in bed, if she had only been fearful, or married, or tearful, or dead, it would have been wonderful. But the woman was perfection, and the prospects are grim, that lovely perfection that nothing can dim. Yes, the woman was perfection, so I'm here with him. Sir, it would have been wonderful.
If she'd only been vicious, if she'd acted abused, or a bit too delicious, or been even slightly confused, if she had only been sulky, or bristling, or bulky, or bruised, it would have been wonderful. If she'd only been willful, if she only had fled, or a little less skillful, insulted, insisting, in bed, if she had only been fearful, or married, or tearful, or dead, it would have been wonderful. But the woman was perfection, and the prospects are grim, that lovely perfection that nothing can dim. Yes, the woman was perfection, so I'm here with him. Sir, it would have been wonderful.
So there's a lot there in this last section that I just read out. Anything that you want to focus on at first?
I do like how he tried his best to make each character sing his own line, still making sense, like within his own thought process, even though they're going back and forth. While still making that back and forth sound like a consistent thought. But they are still having their own two different trains of thoughts. So you get some like sort of funny stuff, like if she'd only been willful, if she only had fled, or a little less skillful, insulted, insisting in bed. Where that insulted, insisting in bed kind of becomes a joke in itself. Even though that was not what Frederick was saying, it was an interjection from Carl Magnus. So I think that's pretty clever. And I know Sondheim loves puzzles, and we'll get into that too with anticipation. But it's just one of those moments that I think he really shines, that you don't, when you're just, watching it or listening to it, you're not paying that much attention to it. It does sort of run through together. But as an actor, you could have a lot of fun with that,
Yeah, like as an actor, obviously you have to keep timing, and with your scene partner, you have to be kind of in that together. But it's like you are still singing basically these lines without the interjections being
You're
there.
not
like,
hearing that second character. It's you are in your own train of thought, getting from one line to the next. And that, to my knowledge, looking at this, still seemed, I could see a thread through each of their eyes. But there's still that interaction between them that they're unaware of, which adds for some comedy.
Oh, yeah. The thing that stands out to me here is specifically the section they say, or bristling, or bulky, or bruised. Of course, there's the alliteration of the B's and stuff going on there, but it almost also sounds like they're talking about a piece of fruit. Like, I don't know. It just is. I don't know. Like a bulky
pear.
Or bruised is just like, it's just a weird way to, I don't know, describe a person.
Yeah, it is. It's, I mean, clearly the alliterative aspects there are what he was going for, but it is an odd descriptor of a person, especially starting with a bit too delicious.
Right. Well, yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that like leads us into like that thinking of you know, that perfect pair.
Which might lean into the even more objectifying of her, right? Like trying to describe her in ways that are not human. So truly making her an object.
Of course, I think what this leads up to is like the big laugh line. Like, it would have been perfect if she was dead. That would have been actually the best case scenario, because then I wouldn't, of course, be obsessing over her anymore.
Yeah.
So that would be the wonderful thing if she was
if only
a dead person.
She were dead. None of this would have happened. This show wouldn't have existed.
Or it would be a very, very different show.
That's true. It could have been a fun, like, locked room murder mystery.
That's right.
They're all there in the country trying to figure out who killed her.
I'll call up Steve and ask him to do some rewrites. Yeah. We'll see. Well, what do you think? Like, overall, like, just this song by itself, like, is this one of your favorites of the score, middle of the pack, or like, or bottom of the pack? Like, where do you put it?
It's not one that I think of often.
Yeah.
But after listening to it, I mean, it is a fun comic relief song, even though it's not really a comic relief song. It's comic relief in disguise as like a psychological duologue sort of thing.
Yeah.
The thing that keeps coming to mind about it is, and I know this is very forward thinking, years out now, is Agony from Into the Woods. Its like spiritual sibling to whereas Agony is far more cartoonish than this, but it still has these like two self-centered, narcissistic, upper-class men thinking and brooding over an imagined woman that is not exactly who they think she is, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it's comedic. It's the comedy is found in their complete delusions about the person, right? So I don't know why. I mean, the similarities are there, but they're not really the same song per se. But it's still got that like vibe. So something about that, and there is something about the second act of this show that I find much more interesting than the first act of the show, which is often not the case with many shows. A lot of times it's a very thrilling first act, and the second act is sort of wrapping things up. Whereas this show, it's almost like the entire first act is just the setup for the bulk, the meat of it, right?
I agree with that.
And so this really becomes a much more fun, interesting piece than it could have been.
Well, yeah, and I've actually mentioned that fact specifically, where I just find this show weirdly paced in that, like the whole first act is just set up. We're getting to the country. Like that is really where we're going to. Right. And then in the second act, it feels like just like, okay, a bunch of stuff happens and we're done. Like it just wraps up really, really quickly. To the point, because I love that Agony comparison, because I think you're right. I think that this is a great precursor to that song. But when I look at some of like the cut songs, for instance, that Sondheim lays out, I am a little bit disappointed that some of them couldn't have been added in. And maybe this is sacrilege. Maybe remove some of the night waltzes. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I think 3 you get a little too many at that point.
Yeah, but it's like there's this song called Two Fairy Tales that he talks about and puts the lyrics into the book Finishing the Hat. And it was supposed to be essentially like this song where it's two characters that are singing, but not necessarily to each other. It's Henrik and Anne singing, but they're in their opposite rooms. And it was cut because of time, where it's just that it felt like it was just making the show stop dead too much. But I think at the expense of us learning a little bit more about Henrik, because he really has nothing to do in the second half of this show up until like the very, very end, which is always kind of too bad.
Yeah, there's something, and I think too, it was going to immediately follow this, right? There's something about having two of the exact same type of song back to back, where it's like two people singing to themselves, but having that sort of dialogue that they are unknowingly having. You do. I know his whole idea was, theme and variations with this show, but you do need to also vary the order of them. You don't want two of the same song back to back. Then it becomes, very samey. It's like, oh, we just saw this scene. So I get it. Sometimes
it becomes theme and variation.
Yeah,
is what it comes. Yeah,
and variation. So yeah, I mean, sometimes things just gotta go, even though it's not that they're bad. It's just that you want to move along. And this show is already pretty long to begin with. I think
it is. Yeah.
Even with if you're including an intermission, it probably can get 3 hours, which is that's lengthy.
Yeah, I have to remember. I think because there is a version. I think it's the 1990 opera version, Lincoln Center opera version, or sorry, New York opera version. That's on YouTube currently. I think it is. I think it is actually 3 hours.
Yeah,
because they include the 15-minute intermission with like interviews and stuff like that. But let's not put it off any longer. We've arrived at perpetual anticipation.
This is the moment everyone's been waiting for, too.
Everyone has been waiting for. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to read out all of the lyrics right now, because this is what's going on. We have 3 of that kind of Greek chorus come back out. The Mrs. Nordstrom, Mrs. Segstrom, and Mrs. Anderson have come back on. And they basically sing like a round, right? So one person starts, and then another person starts a little bit later, and then another person starts, and then they all end. We could
say the lyrics in a round if you want. I think that would be totally not confusing for people.
Yeah, so not confusing. Here is what the full text of what they're saying is, though, which is, perpetual anticipation is good for the soul, but it's bad for the heart. It's very good for practicing self-control. It's very good for morals, but bad for morale. It's very bad. It can lead to going quite mad. It's very good for reserve and learning to do what one should. It's very good. Perpetual anticipation's a delicate art, playing a role, aching to start, keeping control while falling apart. Perpetual anticipation is good for the soul, but it's bad for the heart.
Perpetual anticipation is good for the soul, but it's bad for the heart. Perpetual anticipation is very good for the self-control. It's very good for morals, but bad for morale. It's very good for
I don't know. Is there where do you want to start with this? Is there anything that specifically like jumps out at you?
So I think this does add a little energy into the moment of the show, right? It's not so much what they're saying. I mean, it is a lot of what they're saying, but a lot of it is also just the energy of the song itself. It adds, like we said, variation. It goes from this sort of like slow march sort of song into something a little more lively. So it just, it renews interest in what's going on. But it also, from like a musical perspective, you did say it's a round, but it is also maybe not a round. It's kind of a round. And I think it also, I know I've said he loves puzzles before, but this is very much like a musical and lyrical puzzle that I'm sure he had a blast writing. Because, each person here, they do say the same lyrics, but there are some moments where it's not the same, or lines are cut.
Right, exactly. And they because they're singing over top of each other, there's some blending that goes on.
So it's not an exact round. Like some of the melody changes for each person in a certain way.
Let's call it an oval then.
Yeah, it's a rhombus. I don't know. The one thing that sticks out is when they get to, a lot of it is over this vamp, right? It's a steady harmonic line until we get to the second time perpetual anticipation comes around, which also ends on this line like contemplate or learning to wait, or what two people are saying, another person saying good. And that's when it starts like changing to this new harmonic section. It's a new chord, right? We moved to, I forget if it's the 4 or the 5, I forget. But going from there, the lyrics get a little more, not quite sinister, but they keep talking about like falling apart. They come back to it's good for the soul, but bad for the heart. As that's happening, harmonically, we have this like falling action as we start talking about falling apart. And, everyone's lives are also about to start falling apart. The pieces have been put into place. This is where the action is going to start right now. It's basically what the song is saying, is that we've been building up this entire show for what you're about to see, which is, first we got to learn the backstories. We got to learn why everyone is connected. We need to raise the stakes a little bit. So everyone's going to be in the same location miraculously for an evening or so. And now there's going to become more and more. I forget when exactly Carl Magnus starts talking about a duel or whatever that is. It's at some point in the show. I think we have heard it by this point. So that's on the horizon. Yeah, it's pretty interesting how he shifts the lyrics around too to still make sense. So he excludes certain lines to make the rest of the round shorter, so they sync up at certain points, right? But even with the lines he excludes, it still makes logical sense as like a sentence.
Well, I think that's what the fun part of this song is for me, at least, which is like it starts off kind of in that round, and then they do sync up there for a little bit, and then we go into the finish.
Right.
I mentioned in a previous episode how I feel like Perpetual Anticipation is kind of like the spiritual third night waltz in the piece, which is that it's kind of more commenting on what is happening or about to happen in the show. Like it's not really like a character song where we're learning more about the person, or they're starting in one place and ending in a different space, sort of thing. It's fun, I guess, is the quick answer to me. But kind of like our song we just finished talking about, it's not one that it's like, oh, you know what, I'm going to throw on Perpetual Anticipation to go and take a listen to, sort of thing.
Yeah, I think some of these songs to sort of take the place of like a transition or a playoff music.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it helps move the story along too, where you have this Greek chorus commenting on what's about to happen rather than what has just happened. That way, and it gets the audience in the frame of mind of the coming, rather than just sort of passively enjoying this experience. It's like, oh, hey, audience, wake up. This is about to happen. Everything's gonna go nuts right now.
This is the opening to Sending the Clowns, essentially.
Yeah.
Is what
this is
doing.
Everyone pay attention. The song is coming up.
I'm sure you're aware because you have probably taken a look at the Fish in the Hat book. But this is also not the original lyrics that Sondheim wanted to have in this song. Mm-hmm. He wanted to go a little bit weirder in this song. So the Perpetual Anticipation is good for the soul, but it's bad for the heart was initially Perpetual Anticipation is good for the soul, but it's bad for the skin. He says, I rarely change a lyrics idea simply because of a collaborator's taste, but Hal disliked the line so intensely that I gave in. But I'm sorry I did. The right tone would have been just weird enough to enliven the mysteriousness of the moment. I don't know. Do you agree with that? Do you prefer the original, or do you think it was better to be changed to heart?
So I see what Hal was saying, where you hear that line and it sounds pretty gross. Like it's something about the visual. Anytime you like focus on skin is kind of gross. But I like the line better. Like it's bad for the skin because it fits everyone's personalities so much, especially after the song we just had about focusing on this outward appearance of everyone. And that's kind of what everyone in the show is obsessed with, is like how their appearance, how they appear to others, how others appear to them. It is sort of the focus of the show. That is sort of the theme of the show. Like everyone is worrying and they wish they weren't worrying about what's going on because it's going to make them age or something,
Right.
Yeah. There's a lot of focus on physical appearance that I think it really ties it in.
I have a hard time getting past it only because I've just heard like quote unquote, the actual lyrics for so long that I'm just trying to imagine what it would sound like with the characters singing.
Yeah, I wonder what sort of rhymes he would have come up with skin.
Mm-hmm.
Sin?
Right. Yeah.
That's too close. Toss me in the bin,
Kith and kin?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Eric, for joining me here once again. This has been fun. Hopefully we don't need to perpetually anticipate your next return back to the show. It can be
I don't know.
A little bit quicker.
So the last time I was on, we had spoken about this before, was literally the day that Illinois put the stay-at-home order in place. So I might be bad luck. I think
Maybe.
I think I said that we were bemoaning the fact that Broadway had shut down, and I said something like,
Yes.
when this comes back in 2 months or whatever, I don't think things will be the same. And I was very wrong. I mean,
it's very, very wrong.
I was very wrong. So yeah, hopefully, I don't know what sort of hellgate I'm going to open up with this episode, but I'm sorry, everyone.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. If people did want to stay in contact with you and see what you're up to, what is the easiest way for them to do so online?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter or Instagram. I'm at the EMR Music. I also have a website, ericmatthewrichardson.com. There might be something popping up. I don't know when this is coming out or what. I have some things up in the air that I don't know when they're happening, because who knows when anything is happening anymore. But at some point, there will be a short film that I did music for over the summer.
Oh, nice.
And I did another 10-minute musical that might have something at some point. Who knows? People, take your time with stuff. It's okay.
It's fine. If the last year is any indication, this episode is going to be out in either 2 weeks or 2 years. I don't know.
Or
I don't know
honestly,
what time
never.
is
We
anymore.
could find out. This might all end next week. Who knows?
Wait, other people are listening to this?
Right.
Yeah.
It'll just be you and me talking to each other for eternity with no one else.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thanks so much for listening. You can send emails to puttingittogetherpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow Sondheim Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. And you can support the show on Patreon by going to patreon.com/puttingittogetherpodcast. Thank you to the Alberta Podcast Network and to the Calgary Foundation this week. Putting It Together is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and pretty much anywhere you can get podcasts from. Consider subscribing so that you never miss an episode. Next week, we'll be talking about The Miller's Son. I can't wait to trip the light fantastic. As always, a big thanks to the great Chris Taniguchi, who designed the podcast artwork, and to Nick Driscoll for composing our theme music. Well, we've reached the end of our episode. Yes, I know. Goodbye for now.
I see you shiver with anticipation.